Hello and welcome to this webinar hosted by Format and the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby. Today we're discussing how sport can maximize the potential of social media. For those of you who don't know who we are, I'm Elma Smit, the host of the Good, the Scaz, and the Rugby, and I had to really focus not to say that when I started the sentence. And I usually make a podcast with Red Roses legends Emily Scarrett and Mo Hunt. And joining me for the next hour, as per the ads that you've seen, James Haskell himself, former England international, host of the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby, DJ, author, and someone who knows a thing or two about building a pretty strong social media following. Hey, Hask.
Hello, how are you?
It's good to see you. It's a lot sunnier where he is, as you can tell. I've already closed the curtains on this day. Sam Brett also joins us. He's worked across the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby for 2.5 years and is now head of content. He's also displaying both of his big ferns. Thanks, Sam.
Hi, Elma. Yes, I'm here in the studio, actually. It's very tropical.
We usually film at Sam's house. That's correct. And Will Gilgrass, who's the managing director of Format, a tool for social media and marketing teams. Will is here to give us a brief overview of Format and how it works. Hey there, Will.
Hey, Elma. How are you? Thanks for helping us with this.
It's brilliant to be here. So give us the top line. We'll obviously get into the detail a little later.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Format's a human-powered digital asset creation tool supercharged by AI. So it helps teams make video and static assets a lot faster, easier, and with less stress. It was always on brand and always pixel perfect as the designer intended, regardless of the designability of the person using the platform. So it's been in development for a little while. Good, the Bad, and the Rugby and Athletics Weekly, amongst others, have used it at World Cups and at Olympics. And we launched properly at the end of last year, and excited in the next hour to get into it, to understand how Sam and the team have been using it, and show everyone a bit more about what Format can do.
Yeah, because it really does sing in the practical application. That's where you see the magic happen. I will, as we say, give you some more detail on that functionality in a little bit. But thank you so much to everyone who's joining us. We'd love to know who you are. Where are you? So make yourself known in the chat. If you have any questions or thoughts, we'll definitely have time for those. We look forward to hearing from you. Don't be shy, please. We don't have any shy people on this call, luckily, so far. Joining from Manchester. Hi, Billy. Great to see that you're here. Hi, Gemma from Exeter. It's great to see some familiar names and faces there. Let's start with you, James. You pontificate on the topic regularly, but why is it important for rugby to get social media right? And who should rugby be learning from?
So I think social media is firstly not for everybody. I think there's this big misnomer now from a corporate stand or a business standpoint that you need it and that individuals need it. I truly believe unless you've got something to promote, and that doesn't mean showing people what you had for dinner or how wonderful your kids are, because it's sort of a bit of an odd platform to sort of overshare with. But I think from a business context, particularly in rugby, it's the only real marketing you control now. And I think because of the shift of power away from the broadsheets and newspapers and sort of TV into stuff that you can create yourself to an audience that is very engaged in it. You know, the secret to social media really is having a consistent product or consistent set of content that doesn't really deviate. People know exactly what they're going to get. That's why the advent of podcasting itself has become so popular, is because people are sick of short form, all things to all people, kind of short sound bites and bits and pieces, when actually people want to look below the or behind the curtain and see what's actually going on. Hence why, if you look at Netflix and Amazon, the biggest things on there are documentaries now. It's no longer just watching the sport. You have to know the people, and then now you have to know the people's families and the athletes' wives or the athletes' partners or whatever it is, and the kids and everything in it as well. So it's a very different dynamic with social media in particular, because of that ability to control the medium and also deliver to a set audience. You know, the reason my social media has been successful in certain areas, but it's also limited, is in your very kind opening words. You listed everything about 50 things that I do. So I sound a bit like a sort of Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. One day I'm a street painter, next minute I'm a chimney sweep. Next minute I'm selling balloons. It doesn't really work if you do multiple disciplines. But with sort of sport in particular, and rugby, you can present a sort of a set of content which has, in our case, a foundation in rugby, which is much more irreverent and fun and light-hearted. But I think rugby, unfortunately, doesn't know how to market itself. It's a very complicated game. It doesn't kind of lend itself to modernization like it should do. And social media is a way of dragging some of these archaic thought processes and some of this old school way of marketing into the modern world. And if you nail it and get it right, it can really, really help you. And I think with our podcast in particular, the reason the Good, the Bad Rugby appeals is because it is a look behind the curtain. It is chemistry, and the social media off the back of that is an extension of that. And I think for me, of all the things I do, it's actually one of the most consistent things. And if I just did that, my audience, I reckon, would be even bigger. Unfortunately, as I've alluded to, there's too many other things going on. So I think rugby is definitely someone that can benefit from social media. It's still very scared. It still doesn't understand it. It still doesn't, I think, fully embrace the power of it. And also with social media, there are the good sides and the bad sides. And what you've got to ultimately remember is not everyone's going to like what your content is, and lots of people can complain. But we did an interview with the royal family, and we had 2 million views in less than 24 hours. We had 3,000 comments, of which 500 were negative, and the rest of it were. And that out of 1 million people, only 3,000 could be bothered to comment, and only 500 were negative. Yet I imagine most people and most brands would panic about the 500. You have to look past these. It doesn't matter. Not everyone's going to like everything. And because we're programmed to hear negativity, social media can often be stunted. But actually, sometimes you just got to be unapologetic yourself. And I think rugby and the podcast in particular, well, I'll go by rugby are unapologetic. Rugby itself is pretty apologetic. And I think it could definitely do more in social media.
Let's take this to you, Sam. Who do you think in sport and in rugby is getting it right? And then Will, I'd love to come to you on this as well.
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of getting it right, I think that can mean different things to different people. So in terms of the overall potential of social media, I see it as covering community, whether that's engaging it, growing it, managing it, and then also monetization, which is sponsorship, brand growth, live events, converting people to buy tickets for events, for instance. And in terms of who's getting that right, obviously that means different things. If you're a club versus if you're a union, if you're a news outlet versus a player. So I think, but what I do think is that in rugby, one thing that kind of is a common thread is that there's a big desire for us to convert casual fans into rugby fans. It's well known that rugby is not at the minute one of the most popular sports in the country. 17% of Brits in 2023, according to a poll, followed rugby versus 38% for football. You go global, that's going to be smaller. You look at Gen Z, it's smaller again. So converting these casual fans is such a big part of getting it right in rugby. Pages that are doing it well. Something I've really enjoyed is a piece of rugby adjacent content that England Rugby have been doing during the Six Nations. It's like a food series. They're essentially interviewing their chefs. You might have seen this weekend just gone, they did a reel about what the England players were eating post-match. And you might think, actually, it's pretty ballsy to be doing a food series in the middle of the Six Nations, this centerpiece tournament. But actually, that piece of content's got 4 million views. And it just goes to show that what people want, kind of similar to what James was saying, isn't just like straight edge. They want to know about the personalities, the people behind the pictures as such. So another way that you can invite that, I think, is through memes. I would say that head of content. But you've got Rugby Pass who are consistently putting out really good memes, Champagne Rugby. And what memes do is transcend sport and create a cultural moment. They're really shareable. I think like during the pandemic, the amount of memes being shared on Instagram daily doubled. So like it's a real way that we connect with each other. And if you're able to harness that, it's a really powerful way of, again, transcending that sport. Like you'd send it to your friend who's only partly into rugby and invite them into the fold. So yeah, again, converting fans. And then I think personality-based content, it's hard to ignore. Please don't sack me, James. The Love of Rugby have done a very good job of branding, marketing themselves lately. They're obviously in an earlier stage of their product life cycle. But like you see them putting themselves into memes. You see them embracing the likes of Squid Rugby, who's a very non-traditional rugby voice, and showcasing his personality. It's something that we actually did first, and to great success, is put our stars front and center on Good Bad Rugby and Good Scaz Rugby. And yeah, I think the more you can build that into your content, the better you can do. Yeah, in terms of players, I looked at Jodie Ounsley, not currently a rugby player, now a gladiator, in fact, on BBC, but she's very good at doing content about her cochlear implant. And if you look at her page, she'll do like an explainer video on it, probably, I don't know, it could be as recent as like once a month, because she knows that she's constantly gaining followers and she's constantly reaching new followers. And like, it's important for her to be spreading that message. Looking at personality again in the men's game, a bit of a random pick this, but Will Stewart, he's got a really funny Instagram page. If you look at it, perhaps that personality isn't being utilized to its greatest effect by the powers that be at England Rugby. But yeah, like, these are some examples of people that I think are getting it really well, doing it really well in rugby. And then just to offer one more page that I draw a lot of inspiration from in football is 433. They are a very minimalist and not over stylized football publisher page. So they're publishing news, they're publishing scores. Their branding, I said, is very minimal, which means it's not very, like, it's widely consumable. They use a lot of image-based storytelling, transcends language, which is very important for football. And they've got a full-time score graphic, which, if you look carefully, is incredibly similar to the one that we only recently started putting out.
Funny how that happened.
Yeah, it is funny. But yeah, this is the thing with socials, like, and particularly rugby, like, we're in a position where we're not the biggest sport in the world. So it's, you know, actively encouraged to steal, borrow, use ideas from across the board.
Yeah, and a rising tide, all boats, all of that jazz. Well, we know that people follow people. The most followed accounts on any social media platform out there, 80% of the time, will belong to individuals, not brands, not teams. And so when you are managing a brand account or a team account or a big platform that doesn't have one singular person at the heart of it, there are specific challenges to this. Who do you think is getting it right? Who do you follow, and what do you love?
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, sort of echoing what James and Sam said, the main thing is, like, with these accounts, is just to make people care, and it's to build sort of those rivalries, the heroes, and develop the stories. And I think, as a lot of sport, you know, seen across the board, people are moving from following teams to following individuals. It's a lot of rights holders that are here, and particularly as sports are trying to move into new markets. It's a lot of rights holders that are celebrating individuals from different countries to try and make a stake in that country. So the NBA are doing really well with, like, Giannis in Greece and Jokic in Serbia. You know, even the NFL, I think, when, like, Louis Rizamit sort of moved over, the content they created through NFL UK and the Chiefs is kind of really good to try and cement NFL in the UK market. And so I think a lot of it just sort of comes down to that. And I think with inspiration, there's loads of people you can look at. There's loads of, you know, there's loads of brilliant people working in sports marketing. But I think often just look at, like, local clubs as well, because they don't have the shackles of sort of brand guidelines and all these kind of things. And the content might not be sort of fully polished and brilliant, but their ideas and what they're trying to do and their knowledge of their audience, even if it is just 100 people in the clubhouse at the end of the day, at the end of the game, is so informed that actually some of the content they do is great. I mean, just in a league that I play in, like Chiswick Rugby, they're doing, I mean, they do some, like, really interesting stuff and getting some really big numbers just because it's kind of fun. Like, VO cameras and the technology is there, and there's a lot that a lot of people could learn from amateur clubs, I think.
Definitely. A shout out to everyone who's joined us: Alexander Woodhouse, Charlotte Harwood, who does sporty com stuff, Karen from Scunthorpe Rugby Club, Daniel from Bowls, England, based in Leamington Spa, Lewis from Watford, Will, and also Rob. Great to have you guys along for this webinar. Now let's chat Six Nations. It's obviously the topic at the moment. The men's Six Nations tends to dominate the early part of the year's rugby conversation, and there's so much happening around it. We are functioning in a space now where sports' most marketable athletes predominantly tend to not be rugby players. Ilona Maar, however, she's the only rugby player in that top 100, and she is setting the bar incredibly high with deeply personal, but also very distinct angles on everything that's happening. She's attracting some of the attention, I would say, away from the men's Six Nations and ensuring record attendances in the women's game. But just for a moment, let's take a look at the approach taken on the men's Six Nations on the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby's channel, Sam, before we refer to the women's one.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so there's, loosely speaking, two pillars to what we're doing when we're creating content with the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby. There is the creation of the content, and there is the promotion of the content. So in terms of what we're creating, that consists of show cut downs, which is kind of highlights from the podcast itself, branded show cut downs, which is our sponsored content, and then we've also got a publisher strategy. This is something that we implemented during my time here, and is essentially posting news, scores, and user-generated content. This publisher strategy is something that is quite resource heavy. Like, you think you're competing with your rugby passes, your BBC News, your Sky Sports, and we're quite a small team. So we tend to scale this up and down around the tournament. So we're actually in a peak right now, obviously, with the Six Nations happening. But it's actually a very valuable tool for us as well. Like, during the World Cup, it was a huge driver of our growth. Like, we grew by 186,000 followers, and one user-generated UGC piece that we posted on YouTube has got 12 million views. So it's a really useful strategy for us during these busy times. So that's what's taking up a lot of our time. So that's the creation. And then in terms of the promotion, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thought that goes into that as well. I've already alluded to the fact that we're trying to engage these casual fans. And for me, the golden rule is to assume that whoever's seeing your content is only potentially interested. So they might be a rugby fan, but they might not find James Haskell their particular cup of tea. They might be a casual rugby fan, or a part-time rugby fan, or not a rugby fan altogether. They might not be a sports fan at all. And the way that that affects how we promote the content is significant. So we need to ensure that our videos give you a reason to carry on watching within the first 3 seconds, first sentence, probably less than that even. Headlines need to be very spot on. And, you know, we're not afraid of using the phrase rugby player instead of a player name from time to time, because if we want a piece to go big, then we're assuming it's going to reach audiences beyond rugby, and they might not know who X player is. So yeah, that's one of the big things we do. And then the other golden rule is always ensuring, like, this is super important actually, is always ensuring that we're working within the algorithm parameters for each social page. So what I mean by that is, if you're on Instagram, you're posting in 9:16 video, not landscape. Same goes for TikTok. On YouTube, for instance, you want to post your graphics static in 1:1. On Instagram, that's 4:5. And this sounds pernickety, but actually all these small wins have such a massive impact. Like, for example, last week even, I was on holiday, but the show went out an hour later. Our main GBR main show went out an hour later than scheduled, just due to a miscommunication. There was a mishap with our returning G brand show that also went out a little bit later. I think we forgot to promote the lifetime. This sounds really disastrous, but it's not normally like this. Anyway, the impact was that there was actually quite a notable dip in views. So my point being that it can seem pernickety and frustrating to be tailoring your content so specifically to all these different platforms, but like, the marginal gains stack up really quickly.
And that's a really high bar to constantly meet, which is why format is such a crucial tool. James, he's just given a tiny little dig there in your direction, and the Hask didn't even respond yet. He's sitting there buying his time. So if you are not everyone's cup of tea, James Haskell, who is not your cup of tea? Who's not getting it right at this stage during the sixth?
That's a very good question. I mean, we all know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not even sure I'm anyone's cup of tea. I mean, maybe there's a few. There's certainly a line longer of people who don't like me out the door than there is. But I'm quite comfortable in being that way, as I'm not sure how else I could be. But I think for me, do you know what? Again, I actually looking at some of the. I've got the chat open on some of the questions. There's interesting people talking about kind of engagement and what's the point of having engagement if it doesn't lead to money. And I think, I don't digest a lot of rugby content in terms of going elsewhere. I think, I try to always analyze my own social media around kind of things like timings and, what kind of content's working, what Sam says about kind of what the algorithms like and what should be done and, how you tag things properly. And I think, a viral piece of content can sometimes have nothing right about it. They just hit the zeitgeist and go completely mad. I think for me, rugby in general, just because it's got a fear of kind of, like I said, it kind of has an arrogance around kind of the belief that it's very popular, and particularly people feel like it's everyone's really into it. And as Sam alluded to, people aren't, and it's quite complicated to understand. And I think, putting content out there that either will drive fans into stadiums, which is a monetary return, things like merchandising or events or, building followers up around and creating heroes around athletes. I don't think we get that right. Even there's no particular pages that I look at and don't think we get right, but I think there's some real golden rules about, are clubs driving people to watch rugby? Are the RFU driving people to watch rugby, to digest their content? And, is it distinct enough, or is it a case of trying to, appease everybody and then you get nowhere? Half the things we laugh at online or memes and bits and pieces of stuff that you probably shouldn't, or in one camp everyone's going to laugh themselves hysterically, in another camp everyone's going to be bitterly offended. You need to drive opinion, and that's what you need to create. You don't have to go along the way of sort of a Piers Morgan or certain people who are just saying things for be controversial sake. But having an opinion, I think, online is very important. And I think especially around rugby content, why are you posting it? What is the point of you posting it? If the honest answer is it's not going to lead to any monetary gain or whatever, you're sort of wasting your time, unless you are a social commentary page, unless you are a meme page, unless you're trying to build your numbers up to then get to 1 million followers, so then brands will start paying for ads on it. You've got to be quite smart about why you're doing it. And I think you've always got to trace back to the reasons, the attention to detail, the best practice, and also how do you actually get paid? Because my social media, to be honest with you, is all about how do I get paid? Because I would rather have half the followers and get the money. I mean, because it's interesting with Good Bad Rugby as a podcast. I think we're consistently 120th or something on the list of podcasts out of everyone, but we're in the top 4 earners out of any podcast in the UK. And that's something to think about. And it's how we can translate listeners into financial remuneration. And that's exactly what rugby needs to learn to do. But it is possible. You just got to work out what your hook is and what you're trying to sell.
Yeah, rugby doesn't have to be everything to everyone. It just needs to leverage and harness the power that it has within it to appeal to an audience who want to be a buying public. Now, the question is, what does women's rugby bring to the equation, Sam? How do you change what you put out on the Scaz and the Rugby's platforms during Women's Six Nations? Do you change anything?
Yeah, so there's a nuance to it for sure. I think with both Good Bad and Good Scaz, we are aiming to grow the game in both camps. I think it's not necessarily at the top of our kind of pyramid of what we want to achieve, but it's certainly, I mean, calling it a byproduct is too gentle, but like it's, we care about it. And I think for GSR and the women's game in particular, that's even more at the forefront because it's in an earlier stage. So yeah, it's even more intrinsic to what we do. And the other thing with Good Scaz Rugby is that because it's a smaller space, we have an opportunity to be a louder voice, particularly because we're early adopters. So yeah, we want to be a women's rugby hub from a publisher perspective for sure. And that absolutely impacts the editorial decisions that we make in what we post. So for instance, ahead of the Women's Rugby World Cup on GSR, we were doing posts about tickets coming out, and we were really hot on ensuring that we were signposting to those tickets. Whereas for the men's, that's almost a bit more of a foregone conclusion. Like, that the knockout stages are going to sell pretty well, whereas we want to be part of that driving force. So yeah, owning the space is massive on GSR. I also mentioned earlier about kind of interchanging your language depending on who you're trying to reach. So rugby player versus rugby player's name. I think that particularly during tournament time, Six Nations time, that changes a little bit. The reason being that we want to be showcasing these players. We want to be putting them front and foremost. So, for example, our team of the week for the women's competition, we have in the past been very conscious to put player imagery in it because we want to showcase these athletes. It is more work and it has been challenging in the past than just doing a graphic, but wherever possible we want to do that. Another example is a piece of content I was working on not this afternoon about Sadia Kabea, who I don't think it's a spoiler, but she's on Good Scaz Rugby this week, and it's a cover graphic for a cut down where you could put rugby player, and it's her talking about her race and what it's like to be one of very few black athletes in the Red Roses women's rugby England squad. But we've opted to put her name in there just because contextually it's very important. I think that her name is front and center in that because she is a pioneer. So yeah, there's definitely nuance to the women's side of things. And yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates it.
Certainly. Now, Will, you worked for 7 years in-house at Red Bull, and in the last couple of years, you've consulted with a number of other brands, Optimum Nutrition, Monster in particular, around activating around sport. And so from a commercial perspective, as James just said, it's about harnessing all of the momentum that we have and optimizing it and really turning it into business opportunities. What do you think works well when you're looking at this from a brand perspective, from a client perspective?
I think like where brands do well is when they understand sort of the talent, the athlete that they have with them, and the story that they're able to sort of carry the brand message with, sort of for them. Sort of like back in the day, you'd have footballers or whatever advertising cigarettes, and you'd probably never see those footballers' faces anywhere. Now you walk down the street, you're constantly seeing famous faces everywhere. You scroll through your phone, and on Instagram, you've got a famous face next to a picture from your mum's holiday, and you can't escape it. So the impact of seeing someone famous just doesn't like carry the same weight. So what you need to do is like really hook people with the story and the value. And so it's like, why are they in here? What story are you telling? And then what's the value to the audience for staying with this content and watching it? And a lot of it might be like humor, it might be sort of interest, it might be backstage information. I mean, there's one bit of branded content which just like absolutely shouldn't have worked, which was like with SC Johnson and the Liverpool squad sort of advertise or sort of promoting World Earth Month. And like all of those things just sort of sounds like working in social media teams, for Red Bull and stuff, you get these briefs and you're like, I don't know how we're going to make this interesting. But actually, they got 5 or 6 of Liverpool squad really bought into it. They all sort of played caricatures of themselves. Like Andy Robertson was sort of there holding this creative team lead meeting. The Irish keeper Kelleher was there on his iPod or iPhone listening to Ronan Keating and all this kind of stuff. And it was just so sort of insane and bonkers, but everyone bought into it. There was a wicked story and a really important message sort of coming through it. And I think you really just there's a real nuance where you need to at first like earn the audience's attention before you can deliver the message from a brand that you want to tell it. And because if you do that, they're much more likely to watch it, and more importantly, they're much more likely to remember it as well.
Yeah, I always feel like, and like I pontificate on this a lot, and in my day job, you either need to educate, inform, or entertain, but ideally you want to do kind of a mix of all three of that. And no feelings are hurt here if you've never joined us over on GSR land, or perhaps you're one of our Good The Scaz and Rugby friends and you haven't watched a lot of the Haskell recently. Here's a little roundup of what we've been up to collaboratively between the two projects.
From the sublime to the outrageous, what a season it's been. We've had the biggest names in rugby, alongside some very special guests.
And it's not just the boys having all of the fun.
We're so much more than just a podcast.
We've also been making an impact within the community game.
We've been making quite the noise.
And we've got so much more to come.
Thank you so much. And Alex Rugby. Good night, ladies and gents. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you indeed. So good to watch back some of those highlights. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, as someone who's a producer themselves, that a lot of that success, and as you can see from the big names there, those are editorial efforts. You need to get the biggest, best guests that you can. You need to balance out the Jamie Dornans with the royal family, with the Steve Borthwicks, if you are the good, the bad, and the rugby. And the same thing with GSR, making sure that you're giving people the voices that they want to hear from most in order to deliver entertainment, education, but also just really useful information. Now, that's obviously the first part of the job, but then you have to start building this into a business, which is what we're here to talk about today. Sam, in terms of brand partnerships on GBR and the ones that have really done well over the last few years, what are the things that you've learned about doing and delivering great results?
Yeah, so from when I started to now, we've actually changed our approach to brand partnerships quite a lot. When I begun, we were very much guided by the brief that came in. I mean, I was going to say beggars can't be choosers, but I don't think that entirely reflects it. But like, we were being led by the client, and we would be, for instance, putting out long form hero pieces that were brilliant at hitting the brand messages that the client wanted to, but just didn't really translate into social clips, which meant that we were having difficulties hitting the KPIs, having to put spend behind things. So we kind of, I say quickly, we relatively quickly learned that it was important to have an editorial, whether that's social, whether that's production, input into these brand ideation sessions in advance of them being signed off, if possible. So there's a very collaborative approach now between the commercial team and me and the production team, which goes a long way to ensuring that the content is going to land for the brands. So an example of one of our really effective campaigns and quite broad campaigns is what we did with British Airways for the World Cup, the Men's World Cup in, a couple of years back, I can't remember. So what that encompassed was a hero piece called How Rugby Made Me, which was essentially a Trojan Horse podcast, BA branded. But then we also had some mobile shot hero pieces at Heathrow. I think you might have seen James interviewing Manu Tuilangi, I think, in that video just then. And like, the reason that was mobile shot was because we'd had such this dialogue in the past to ensure that this was going to land on socials. In addition to that, we had England takeover content. British Airways wanted to spotlight their partnership with England Rugby during the World Cup when they otherwise wouldn't be able to because of sponsorship rights. So we gave them placement on our full-time graphics, our team news graphics, initially our news graphics as well. And we were able to hit some like really massive numbers on those publisher pieces as a result. And then like, we even did a piece in the studio here, which was my idea, with a green screen background, and it was just complete nonsense. But I think epitomized it was. So to give a bit more context, it was essentially a rough guide to some of the Six Nations destinations. So this would have been, BA liked working with us so much they came on for the Six Nations. Maybe they didn't after this piece, but yeah. And in essence, that kind of reflects, I think, how we were able to gain the trust of our commercial team, that social first content was going to land, and it did. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the best brand partnerships that we've executed at GBR.
Do you enjoy doing brand partnerships work, James? Like, what do you get out of it outside of obviously the bottom line? What is that collaboration like?
Well, funny you should say that, because you'd think that we would get products and extra bits and pieces off some of these brands, but again, it's not really how they think. I mean, I'd sort of, with British Airways in particular, I was flying, I had sort of 40 flights backwards and forwards to DJing all around the world, and I sort of said, you know, can I get some lounge access and everything else? But it wasn't forthcoming, but we still got money in the bottom line, so it didn't really matter. I'll be honest with you, I really like doing the hero content and brand stuff. I find, truthfully, the corporate world quite difficult to navigate now. I think that they, again, just the general panic about kind of, you know, they have so many hoops to jump through, and it's very interesting. Nobody, you know, back in the day, you know, bear in mind, I've been doing sort of sponsored stuff since I was 18, 19. I'm 40 next month. So 2 months time, sorry. So, you know, I've got a lot of experience working with, and kind of where people were kind of a bit more risque and fun and understood what creating content was about and didn't have these concerns and knew that, you know, maybe some people would like it, some people weren't. We've now kind of got ourselves to a bit of thing where everyone sits around the table and you put an idea and someone puts a hand up and oh, I don't know. And it's got to go through 50 pairs of hands and eyes and no one signs off on it. And then someone will come out of left field and go, oh, what happens? We haven't thought about this. And sort of then you kind of get the same stuff regurgitated. What's your favorite team? What's your big moment? So I like it. I find it hard. I don't get involved in it anymore. I used to really passionately want to create really cool content and do things. We suggest all these amazing ideas, and it always comes back to the same things, particularly around rugby: team of the week, moment of the week, player of the week. And it's sort of more often than not, everyone gets very excited and then they go with the safest common denominator stuff that everybody does. However, every now and then you get a partner that goes, you know, we know what we're going in for here. This is what we want. This is how we want to do it. And more often than not, that content lands brilliantly. It's because it's different. It's fun. It's like, you know, remember the Old Spice adverts came back, you know, all those years, milk tray, you know, all these things we laugh about, remember now, you know, they were magnificent adverts because they stuck in their mind. Some of them you'd have to adjust now to obviously the time we live in, which is fine. But if the bold ideas, I think, people need to be bolder and more fun, and remember that it's not everyone's for everyone. You know what I mean?
They were the memes before the memes were the memes.
Exactly. All the memes that we laugh at now, and all those moments where, you know, because what happens is you used to be able to do something and go, oh, I didn't like that, and you move on. Or like I was equating everything to TV. You turn TV on, you watch something, you go, oh, this isn't for me, and you change the channel. Now you don't change the channel, you write in, you screenshot, you tweet, you post, you burn the whole organization down because you never want to see it again in case it offends your sensibilities. With funny content, you know, if you like stupid memes and rude memes, you're always going to like stupid, rude memes. So I think for me, there are ways and means of being creative and doing cool things. And we see some amazing collaborations, Dre with, you know, Beats by Dre and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, LeBron James getting involved. If you're bold, if you're brave, you can do some amazing things.
It's easy for someone who is a complete maverick to say, let's do more brave things, James Haskell. Your appetite for risk is not normal, and we all know this fact. And this is where format comes in, Will. Isn't that the whole point of creating a really safe framework and a structure within which people can be creative, can be first, because that's what you need to be in digital content, but also then creating enough of a space for when you want to do bold, brave, maverick-like things, the rest is taken care of. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think like the way that Sam and GBR have used it kind of echoes that. I think, you know, there's a basis of content that you have to create if you're a rugby publisher, and they, you know, they are kind of full-time graphics, team lineups, etc. Like they're breaking news. They're the sort of things you need to do, your nuts and bolts, but they're often the things that can take quite a lot of time. They can be quite laborious, particularly sort of team lineups, full-time graphics. And they're the sort of things that, you know, brilliant creators don't really get very excited about, because it's just repetitive, laborious tasks which they don't really sort of want to do. So as I mentioned at the top, like formats kind of we describe as a human powered digital asset creation tool supercharged by AI. Like we still need the humans to create the templates, to create the designs initially that look beautiful and will engage an audience, and you still need the human to input the content to make it as engaging as possible. So whether that's image or text, but we use AI to kind of speed up a lot of those processes. And what that does isn't make the designer redundant, but it gives them more time and more space and make more creativity to come up with new features and new ideas. And equally, it gives people like Sam, social media managers, because they're not waiting on loads of stuff and we've reduced a lot of friction, it gives them more time to come up with British Airways commercial partnership ideas. And so I think, yeah, what we really try and do is with the brand safety, the things that have to happen, the things that are repetitive, we ensure you can't go wrong. The British Airways logo on team lineups are always there, and everything looks as smart as possible to free up everyone's time to make the most of their time and talent. But to show format in a bit more detail, we've got a little video now, so maybe we can play it up.
Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more, make it overdose. Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more. Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more, make it overdose. Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more.
Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more, make it overdose. Damn, look at that, they broke the mold. Give you some more.
Broke the mold.
So cool. I love the edit on that. So good. Now, if you still have questions, please get them in. We're going to be getting to answering your questions shortly. But first up, Sam, this must have helped you so much as someone who's managing to keep up in terms of rugby publishing with the big boys who have offices full of people doing news updates as publishers.
Yeah, it's always pretty satisfying when we get a piece out before the likes of those people. But yeah, I mean, formats has become such an integral part of our working week at GBR and GSR, like purely just because of the huge amount of time and hassle it saves. Like I can't really overstate it enough. Like a team graphic that would have taken us, potentially up to an hour in the past, depending on what the ability of the person in the team is on Photoshop that's been making it, can now, with a bit of prep, be done in minutes, like under 5 minutes. It's honestly been such a game changer for us. Like the other massive benefit of format as well is, I mean, I've mentioned how easy it is to use, but also you can use it on mobile as well. So not me, but if you were a member of the content team that went to the pub once during the Six Nations with your friends and needed to do a news post, you can do that from mobile and not have your laptop out. And format working with Getty, so if that's a subscription that you have, we're fortunate to have it, you can pull through those pictures automatically and it just streamlines the whole process enormously. So yeah, it essentially allows you to create Photoshop level graphics at the speed of, well, I was going to say the speed of light, but like, and with the ease of Canva almost. So like another good example would be during the Rugby World Cup, while we were all experiencing the Owen Farrell ban red card fiasco, and I was living in a hovel in Putney at the time, and it was about 10 p.m. and I had 2 graphics made up ready to go based on whether or not he was going to be banned, both of which had been made in formats with ease. And then as soon as the news came out, I just hit send, and like we were first out on Twitter. And the impact that speed has in the publishing social media sphere is enormous. Like another example of that would be a couple of weeks back where we went out with our England team news on Instagram, again, very quickly because of formats. But due to some sort of mishap in, I don't know, the halls of Twickenham, the England team didn't actually go out on their Instagram. I think they posted it in the wrong order, had to repost it. So there was a sweet like minute or so where we were out before the RFU and getting huge engagement. Like you can tell I'm very excited about this. But yeah, and like realistically, this translates into huge numbers. Like we are on our full-time graphic, which I mentioned earlier, I didn't steal from another page. We are consistently getting like around the 1 million mark in terms of reach after every England game. That graphic itself is actually really complex and something that we had to do in Photoshop for a period because formats didn't yet have the capabilities to do that. But once like we've been very fortunate to be able to work closely with format during its development. And once I kind of said to the team, like, this is something that we're going to be doing regularly, this is something that we need, the innovations were made. And now it's a piece that like I can't really overstate how much simpler it is now to create in formats. And yeah, I mean, it makes our life just a hell of a lot easier as a content team.
Shout out to Billy, who said, I once spilled a drink over my laptop while trying to do a breaking news graphic in a bar, so format would have saved me a lot of money there. And that's the inadvertent costs and consequences of getting it wrong, being last, or destroying your laptop in the process does make it complex. James, is this something that you need to have super skills to be able to use? Is it just because Sam thinks like a phone that he's able to achieve this, or have you had a go yourself?
Well, do you know what? This is a perfect segue into obviously the whole idea of this whole concept is if I can do it, then anyone can do it. The dexterously challenged meathead, former rugby player, if he can operate format, then surely all of you at home need to buy into it. So I will share my screen and show you how it's done. I mean, I knew I was here for some reason. Now I figured it out why they didn't ask.
Are you smarter than a forward? There we go.
So I'll share my screen and I'll show you the site. So hopefully, I'll just close my graphics down. So here we are. We've got my obviously my screen up here, which you can see. Now this is what.
How many tabs have you got open? Oh my goodness!
I know, busy. Well, listen, you've listed DJ, author, podcaster, stand-up comedian, man of the people. I'm single. There's a lot going on up there. But just Will did say close your tabs. I'll be like, there's nothing controversial in there, so we're all good. Anyway, this is obviously what you see on format. So, for example, we've obviously got these preloaded templates that you would have, which Sam alluded to. We're going to go with a simple one here, which you just click on, and it will obviously open. You've got the usual abilities to change things. So let's I'll tell you what, let's choose an image first. Let's do that first. We'll select an image, and let's go with this dashingly handsome man, because why not? There isn't enough James Haskell in these people's lives. So there he is. Look at him, hero. Let's go with Haskell is the only man for us, right? And we'll do that as the headline, and then obviously we can put some subtext below here. Let's say Andy Farrell says James Haskell can save us. There we are, and there you have. Well, let's put James Haskell says so. James Haskell is the only man. Only man. And how much fun I'm having it, only man.
You've had the only twice.
And say, oh, have I?
Stating that.
Oh, I thought, okay, fine. Is the man. All right. I'll take advice. I'm happy. Only man, the man who can save us. Right, there we are. Haskell's, and then essentially that's all you have. You can have the graphic straight away. It's obviously all built in. You saw that it's in 2 seconds. There's so many different parameters. You can obviously save it. I can download it. I'm actually going to keep that and put that up as if Farrell actually said that, because unfortunately I am a washed up former rugby player. But again, there are so many little bits and pieces you can do. Look, it's allowed me to download it. I can have it straight away to my computer. Obviously, you can scale the photos. And again, as what Sam said, the beauty of Getty Images is, if you've got a rolling contract, you can literally, when you go to choose the image here, you can have so many different things to access, so many different photos, and it's so spontaneous. And again, you know, I mean, I've done my shortly, but with some of the team stuff as well, this is one of the more complicated graphics they talked about, is, you know, being able to change that text, to be able to put those names in so quickly, have those images pop up. It's an absolute game changer. And what's really interesting with this particular template is once you choose the different teams at the top, all the colorways change, all the graphics change, and your ability to drop different photographs in and different things is amazing. So there you have it. The whole point is, ladies and gents, if I can do it, you can do it. And you can see it has so many different applications depending on what you would want. So as a DJ, I've split my life into James Haskell as a obviously whatever you see in front of you, and Haskell is a music. So basically, you know, I would do things like record releases, hot takes for James Haskell, lineups and stuff. So it's very, very simple and very versatile.
I'm gonna lose my job.
Go for time.
I said I'm gonna lose my job.
Actually, that is a good point. Why do we even need you? I've just shown up to do it.
I'll just go.
Well, what's on the development horizon for format? Which problems are you solving next?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've got sort of video functionality built in since the video that we played working. So basically where James sort of uploaded an image, we can sort of put in video as well to sort of create templated video graphics. Data integrations we're working on, and we have live, so we can put in live match data. So whether that's sort of like for GBR, it could be things like kick maps or heat maps in football, perhaps. There's also opportunity to pull in live information from, you know, like online marketplaces, whatever it might be. We're also sort of working on a way to allow brands to sort of give creator access to their audiences. So if they want to create templates where after races or whatever it is, there's sort of a UGC element, which we can sort of build in there. But I think, as sort of Sam alluded to, we're kind of at an exciting stage of the platform, having only launched in sort of November, October last year, where with the clients we're working with, we can sort of listen to them, understand what their needs are. Most of the people in format have come from sort of social backgrounds. They're all like working in social teams, so understand the needs of social teams, and we're developing the product along with them. So Sam asked for a need to do some stuff in full-time graphics, and we kind of built it for him sort of fairly quickly, which was like really pleasing.
Okay, let's go through to the questions from everyone in the room here, because that's really important as well. At Rugby with Amy says, what do you want to see more of on social media from players? Sam, I think your insight here would be really useful. What do you think the players can do more of?
Ooh, I think it would be really nice to just see some more, literally just player-led content, player-shot content. I think you see it, like Elona Amaya is an extreme example, but like even just like the players in camp, the players interacting with each other. I think Genji's done it a few times, and like we often say that it comes more naturally to the women's players because they're generally or often more social media literate. But yeah, I think it kind of comes down to, I think, players just having the support, confidence, backing to just post it. Like people ultimately want to see, I've said it earlier, but like the people behind the players and feel like they're like friends, they're part of it. So yeah, more of that, something that James Haskell actually does very well.
Yeah. Billy asked a really interesting question. He said, how should sports teams adapt their social media approach to cater to global audience while also at the same time keeping local fans engaged? And Will, I know this is something that, because you've worked on global brands, you've kind of sat with this question of like, how do you keep that hyper-local feeling? So for example, Bristol Bears and Elona Mar. Bristol needs to be sure that they reinforce their position as a Bristol-based club, and that Elona is coming to play for us. We're not all going to the US. So leveraging that hyper-locality, making sure that you get a few thousand people down to every game now that you have this big name star, but at the same time also positioning this at the wide end of the fan funnel and bringing people along for the ride who perhaps follow Elona because of the body positivity, but doesn't know how many points a try is worth.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there. I mean, I think that the challenge Bristol have is making sure that because Elona is so much bigger than Bristol and like the sport, frankly, is like they need to sort of make sure that that does transition down. And then I think whether she's been doing it independently or in collaboration with Bristol, there's been some fun stuff where she's done, which, you know, she's been around the city, she's tried out different like roast dinners and sort of sausage rolls, I think, or pork pies, I can't remember. But I think it's, again, it's kind of like what's the story to then make it relevant to the audience you're trying to target. It's kind of you know, often it's all well and good working with athletes that have 5 million followers, but actually what's the purpose of working with them? What are you trying to get out of them? And if all of them live in a different country, then trying to sell tickets to, you know, to your game in Bristol isn't sort of super relevant. So I think with all of this, again, it sort of comes back to that idea of story and making people care. And if you can come up with a story that make people care in the audience that you want, then that's kind of where you'll see success.
There's a good question here for you, Hask, from Mark. Do you think the Six Nations Netflix documentary missed the opportunity for players, clubs, and the RFU to use social effectively off the back of it? Despite the views piece, it's also just broader. You could have made this part of the zeitgeist by really jumping on the bandwagon.
Look, 100%. All you have to look at is F1 Drive to Survive. You know, that has completely reinvigorated a sport to the point now where, you know, every driver on the paddock now has a profile. All the battles, all the arguments, all the drama has come forward. You know, I mean, drivers were always never that shy and sort of saying things in press conferences, but you've got people calling people out. You've got George Russell, you know, sort of out the same school of poshness as Alex Payne. And he's calling people out, saying that he doesn't like them. And I just think it's created a really interesting catalyst for that. And unfortunately, I think the Netflix documentary missed the mark in terms of, again, over-sanitized, too thought out. Rugby didn't allow the access because they were fearful of what would be said, thinking that we had any rights to not expose ourselves. So, you know, get it wrong. You know, not everyone is, you know, it's not an issue for to get things wrong, you know, because that's what sport's like. You know, it's a gladiatorial sport for both men and for women. It's aggressive. You're asking people to run into each other at speed, and off the byproduct of that will come aggression. So that's not an issue. I think social media off the back of it as well we could have really developed heroes and special cutaways and content. You know, I don't want to see, you know, Marcus Smith buying a G-Wagon on the phone going, listen, bruv, and all this kind of, it's not, you know, it's not, we could have really, really looked behind it. And I think, unfortunately, every other sport capitalized on it. Rugby fumbled the bag yet again.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one more question here for you, Sam. Will says, can you talk about the relationship and the balance between posting quality, detailed content and speedy content? Is the one more important than the other?
It depends what you're trying to achieve. Like, there's definitely merit to being the bird that gets the early worm. Speed is a great tactic if you're trying to grow quickly. You see people putting out screen grabs of match action versus people putting out nice still pictures off of Getty. I think that for us, when we're trying to build a we're looking for longevity, we're looking for growth in the long term, we look more to quality of picture rather than speed, just to prevent people from unfollowing, give people a reason to follow in the long term.
Maddie Reese asked an interesting question about Welsh sport and saying, while working for a Welsh organization and a Welsh rugby team, all of our content has to be bilingual. It's so much text, but dual posting ruins the engagement. Do we have any recommendations on the topic? Now, Maddie, I come from a country where we have 11 national languages, and most people are on their training wheels because English is none of our first languages. And one thing that I have seen about first language content and bilingual content is that it can be incredibly powerful. It is obviously a challenge, but it also is an opportunity. It's a bit like women's rugby. It's a challenge, but it's a massive opportunity if you do it well. Will, talk to us about how you guys are addressing this on format. But Sam, I'm sure you can also nod to this. The great thing is that in-app translation is improving on a daily basis. And so the great thing is that the movement on languages is that it's going to be a lot easier to work in multiple languages very soon, right, Will?
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, speaking from like a format point of view anyway, I mean, there's sort of two ways that you can sort of play it within the tool. First, you know, you create the version of the asset that you want in the first language. You can then simply duplicate everything across, so all of your content sort of shifts across exactly the same, and then you can reorder it in your second language. I mean, to make it even speedier, we've built in, or we have a facility to build in sort of GPT translation plugin. So ultimately, if you create your asset once in English, and then there's a drop down saying it's in English, you can then have a drop down to all the other pre-selected languages that you want, so that you can easily sort of churn it out in other languages. I mean, would still recommend giving it a once over, like with all of these assets, just to make sure you're happy with them. But yeah, we've sort of built the functionality to really speed that up.
Yeah. I would get creative with how you approach it. We've started integrating symbols into some of our content to reduce the amount of text on things. Maybe you could use video. So if it's a team sheet, it's a video, and then it transitions to the other language. It does sound, I mean, that is a challenge, to be sure.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. It's sensational to get this amount of engagement, participation. It's really nice to not just be talking to ourselves. So thank you so much for making it feel like this was a really intimate room full of friends just hanging out with me in my dining room. We are very relieved that I didn't have any cat chaos disrupting this show for a change. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be sharing the link so that you can watch this again. If you want to share this with someone, send it around, and we will also be including the details for how you can get in touch to talk about using format in your business to solve your problems, a bit like Maddie's trying to solve the language problem. We want to make the creation of digital assets faster, easier, less stressful, and free up all of your creative time to do bold, impactful, creative, and relentlessly high-performing content. Thank you so much, James Haskell, Sam Brett, and Will Gilgrass. Give us a little wave. That's it, guys. Have a lovely evening. Off to the pub we are, and make sure that you partner with us at the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby. Goodbye.
Thank you. Cheers, Elma. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.